Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 47th part of What If Deku Can't Stop Adopting Kids. Hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 252, Sensei. Today was another day of class in the Midoriya Foundation. Given just how many children there were, it's not like he could put them all in one classroom all at once. So he decided to have individual class times. Basically, he would split everyone up into groups of 12. And once he was done teaching one class, he would move on to the next. Thankfully, since Izuku cut out most of the fluff that schools added, classes didn't go on too long. So he could get through everyone without taking all day. It was bright and early, and Izuku was standing in front of what he referred to as Class 1. Class 1 included Eri, Kei, Fu, Kiba, Sansen, Kyoko, Shiruku, Yami, Fuku, Otoko, Kai, over video call, and Mu, who was wearing a sheet. And all of them were waiting for Izuku to start the lesson. Alright, everyone. I'm happy to introduce you all to your new teacher. Izuku said. Ha! Was Fuku's response. Although everyone else did look rather surprised. The door opened, and in came what could only be disturbed a giant yellow octopus man. He wasn't quite an octopus. His head was a round yellow ball, with two small black dots that seemed to be his eyes and a big Cheshire cat-like smile. Most of his body was covered in an academic dress. A large black cloak with a bit of red down the center, and some blue lines along the sleeve. The only other two pieces of clothing he wore were a black tie with a crescent moon on the bottom and a small graduation cap. Coming out of the bottom of the robe were thick yellow tentacles, and from the arm sleeves were four thinner tentacles, two coming from each side. Hello, children. The octopus man said in a cheery voice. My name is Kyoshi Shurji. And I'll be your new teacher as of today. Kei raised her hand. Yes, Ms. Kei. Kyoshi called. What is your question? Are you a man with an octopus quirk? Or an octopus with a man's quirk? Kei asked. Neither. I am a full-fledged human, my dear. And my quirk has nothing to do with octopus. Kyoshi said. Whoosh. Suddenly the man vanished. And then appeared behind Kei with a gust of wind. This is my quirk. Kyoshi said. I don't know why it makes me look like this. So you can teleport? Kai asked eagerly. No, that wasn't teleporting. Kiba corrected. That was super speed. He was moving so fast that none of you could see it. All except me, of course. In truth, she had barely been able to track his movement as well. Appearing as a blur in her vision. Meaning even with her immense speed, this guy was still significantly faster. That's correct, Lady Kiba. Kyoshi said, dashing in front of her desk. His face turned green and a white O appeared on it. Very good. Kyoshi then dashed back to the desk at the front of the room, next to Izuku. Now then, shall we get the lesson started, Mr. Midoriya? Of course. Izuku moved from the front and walked all the way to the back of the room. I'll be watching this first lesson for today. But all of you please focus on Mr. Shurji. Now please begin. Alrighty then. Kyoshi coughed to clear his throat, before continuing. Today we'll start learning about World War III. Or the Quirk Wars. Now can anyone tell me when the Quirk Wars started? 2061? Eri answered, although she sounded a bit unsure. That's correct. Kyoshi confirmed, pulling out a remote and calling down a projector. Quirks first appeared in 2040. And for 21 years tension grew all around the world. After quirks started appearing, the world was in a state of chaos. Most governments weren't exactly jazzed about citizens having superpowers that they could use as weapons. And so many governments quickly enacted anti-quirk policies. This ranged from simply banning the use of quirks to round up every odd person in the country and imprisoning them, to killing them on sight. Each of Kyoshi's sentences was accompanied by pictures put up on the wall behind him. of people with quirks being either rounded up or attacked by police. The children reacted with a combination of disgust and horror. But none of them seemed all too surprised. As I'm sure you've guessed, many people were not pleased about this, Kyoshi explained, showing a new slide of people protesting. Of course, the people with quirks were against this, as well as the relatives of people with quirks. But there were a fair amount of sympathizers who had no personal relation to people with quirks. Although that said, they were all the minority at first, as many of the quirkless people were very much against those with quirks. And quirk discrimination ran wild. As he spoke, images of protests and protesters being attacked by police or other citizens went up. Surprisingly enough, however, as time went on, pro-quirk movements became more and more popular. Kyoshi explained. Mainly for two reasons. The first being that more and more people started having children who had quirks. And second, in a rather surprising display, as time went on, people started to realize that their initial reactions were a bit unreasonable, to say the least. Quirk supporters did their best to take pictures of the horrible things happening to people with quirks. Namely, human experimentation. Many countries started experimenting with people with quirks, mostly to try and figure out the source of their powers, and how to use them for their own purposes. Although sometimes it was more torture than experimentation. Pro-quirk forces risked their lives to get pictures of these horrible things, sneaking into quirk concentration camps and quirk experimentation labs. And thanks to this, the public became a bit more sympathetic. However, that just about evened the two sides numerically, with plenty of people carrying anti-quirk sentiments. Kiba raised her hand. Why didn't the people with quirks just fight back? Because they were children, Kyoshi explained. Remember, quirks only appeared in newly born babies at first. So when the governments of the world started gathering them, there was little they could do. They were reliant on their parents to try and hide them away. They had to stay hidden. Of course, for people with mutant quirks, this was impossible, but for others, they simply needed to never use their quirks in public. This continued on for 21 years. Hate for either side is growing more and more. And the children born with quirks eventually grew up. And eventually, they'd had enough. And they did start fighting back. Thus we enter the quirk wars. The slide changed again, now showing people with quirks fighting back against soldiers and police. Now it's unknown how, when, or what properly started the quirk wars, Kyoshi explained. It's believed that one person with a quirk started fighting back against the government, but we have no way of knowing where or when. Or even if that was the case. But regardless, people started fighting back against governments worldwide. And while people had tried fighting back before, this time, they were actually winning. Those with quirks were the first. They gathered together and started using their powers to slaughter their enemies, taking their weapons and giving them to their sympathizers. And once the quirk war started, it didn't take long for it to end. You see, the quirk war wasn't your typical war. It wasn't fought on some kind of battlefield, or even in certain areas. The fights were happening everywhere, including very populated areas, meaning they couldn't use their big weapons without harming the public. That didn't stop certain countries, but that only made things worse for them, as those acts horrified the public, who started supporting the pro-quirk armies more and more. Another advantage the pro-quirk armies had was speed and surprise. Quirks weren't like many of the weapons the government used, that had to be transported and set up. Quirks could be used in an instant, meaning they had a great offensive advantage, and they intended to use it to its fullest, not giving the governments of the world any time to get out their more powerful weapons, or even make proper strategies. They also specifically targeted people in charge of the anti-quirk forces, something that was easy to do, because those people were public figures and government officials. This caused massive issues, as it essentially left most of the anti-quirk forces without any leadership, causing them to fall apart even faster. Thus the anti-quirk war only lasted about half a year at most. In some parts of the world, it ended sooner. Half a year. Fuku gasped in shock. That's right, it was a pretty short war. Mainly because it was more of a slaughter than a war. Kyoshi explained. All around the world, the war ended one way or another. Some governments simply undid any anti-quirk laws and thus ended the war there. Some governments had all of their people killed and replaced. And some were just completely dismantled and turned into something else. And while the quirk war lacked in longevity, it made up for that in its astonishing death count. Roughly 41% of the population died due to this war. Almost everyone's eyes widened in shock. That's almost half the people in the world, Kiba whispered. Almost speechless from what she just heard. It was in fact a horrible and dark time in human history. And it holds the record for the highest death count of any war in history. Kyoshi explained. And the reason for such a high death count was due to something called the equality purges. You see, the people of the pro-quirk army were typically those who hated any form of discrimination. Racism, sexism, homophobia, and things like that. And now that these people were armed, and they weren't obeying the laws anymore, they decided it was the perfect time to remove such people from the world. And so they used their weapons and their quirks to slaughter anyone who had a discriminatory view. Or anyone who they believed had a discriminatory view. And so the pro-quirk forces would slaughter over 1 billion civilians. Ugh! Kyoko groaned in disgust. People. And thus, we conclude our lessons on the quirk wars, Kyoshi said. Of course, there are many things we skipped over, and if you want to learn more about it, then feel free to do your own research. And if you have any questions, feel free to come and ask me. Now since today's subject was pretty heavy, we'll be ending class early to give you all some time to process that, and then unwind. Class dismissed. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX It was now evening, and Kyoshi had just finished up his last class for the day. And now he was sitting in Izuku's office for evaluation. You did well. Of course, I'd like to observe you a bit more, but my attention is needed somewhere else. Izuku sighed. So I'll have the maids watching your lessons and reporting back to me. I hope you don't mind. Oh, I'm more than fine with it, sir. Kyoshi said, saluting with one of his tentacles. After all, it's not common that people would hire someone with my history. True. But I need talented people who are willing to be loyal to me and my family. Izuku said. I've seen your ability to both teach and your ability to fight. And since you accepted the mind probe, I'm confident I can trust you. Even if you were a former lieutenant for All for One. I believe people can change. I am forever grateful for that, Mr. Midoriya. Kyoshi said, bowing his head. One more thing. Izuku pulled out a file from his desk. This is a little help. I've written down everyone's learning habits, what they're best at, and what they could use help with. As well as their general learning habits. Some will be easier to work with than others. I understand, sir, Kyoshi said, grabbing the file with his tentacle. I'll make sure they all understand what I'm trying to teach them. It's a promise. TCH. Lu scowled at a book he was reading like it had personally offended him. Lu was currently sitting down in the library, with a book in front of him that seemed to be making him very displeased. The Quirk War, give me a break. Lu huffed. This must be quite the hard pill to swallow. Lu jumped in his seat and quickly turned his head to the side to see Kyoshi standing there. Don't do that. Geez, just because you can sneak up on people doesn't mean you should. You don't see me teleporting behind people just to surprise them. Sorry. I just noticed you were reading more about the Quirk Wars, and I thought maybe I could be of help. Kyoshi offered. I know quite a bit about that war after all. Do you think I could stop it? Lu asked, not looking Kyoshi in the eye. If I went back in time, do you think I could stop it? Not a chance, Kyoshi answered in that same peppy tone. Unless you stopped quirks from happening in the first place, this kind of thing was always destined to happen. It's all just a progression of human nature, and the exploding of tension that had been rising for years, long before quirks came around. People back then predicted that World War III would plunge the world into a nuclear apocalypse, and perhaps that would have happened if the nature of the war was different. So even if you could stop quirks from appearing, you might create an even worse future. Lou didn't respond at first. His body tensed up even more, his hands balled into a tight fist, and his teeth started grinding against each other. So I guess coming to the future was a good thing, huh? If I'd been around. He'd been told that going back was a bad idea. But being told that was one thing. Reading about what they did to people with quirks back then. The experiments. The camps. The torture. That was another. Dark, dark times, Kyoshi said. Fortunately you didn't have to go through that. I freaking hate humans. Law huffed as he slammed the book shut. Humanity can be really frustrating, Kyoshi said. I know that most of all. But there are some parts of it that can really make you smile. That really makes life worth living. Try not to let the bad in the world overwhelm you. Otherwise, you'll find yourself completely numb. And that's no way to live. Trust me. Kyoshi grabbed the book. Now I think that's enough studying. All work and no play leave you a dull boy. I heard Ms. Maria is taking a break, so why don't you give her a big hug? I'm not 5. Lu grumbled as he got up from his seat. But you know what? I do think I've done enough studying. Squoop. And like that Lu teleported away. Very good little one. Don't waste your life. Kyoshi said as he quickly put the book back where it belonged. That's probably the most important lesson I can teach here. Chapter 253, Academic Performance. Yeri is a rather earnest student. She'll always try her best and hand in her assignments on time. Although she gets very easily upset at herself whenever she gets something wrong. Eri doesn't really have any subject she's particularly bad at. Roughly above average grades. K is, well, she'll need more attention than the others. Her grades are below average and it's not for lack of trying. K will always try her best while in class, and she gets her assignments in on time most of the time, although she does forget every now and then. K just has a harder time understanding certain things and will need a lot of personal tutoring. Just stay on top of her and she should do fine. Her best subject is history, but even then her grades there are still average at best. Though I will say, no one beats her zoology knowledge. Fu is a rather easygoing student. His grades are a little above average, although they could likely be higher if he cared to put his all into it. Unfortunately, due to the fact that certain subjects can be rather boring, it's hard for Fu to pay attention. I don't blame him, considering his quirk. Boredom for him is much worse than it is for others. For him, it's important to try and make things as interesting as possible. And make sure he's engaged. He's really good at math, but his history skills can vary depending on the subject. Kiba's grades are overall average to below average. This time it is for lack of trying. Kiba despises being in class, although she knows it's necessary. If you can find a way to properly motivate her, her grades will likely go up by a good margin. Sansan is similar to Kiba, in that she hates classes, but even more so than Kiba. Although surprisingly, her hate for being in class motivates her to do better in class. She's aware that if she performs poorly in class, she'll have to spend more time being tutored, so she tries her best to avoid that. As a result, her grades are actually pretty good. Although her handwriting is so bad that reading down what she writes can be difficult. Kyoku, despite being one of the younger students, Kyoku is actually one of the best students. You see, Kyoku loves praise, so she'll try extremely hard during class, so long as you praise her for her efforts. It's pretty simple, just make sure to help her if she looks like she's struggling. She won't ask for help. Shiruku, there isn't much to talk about when it comes to Shiruku's performance in classes. Both her grades, and the effort she puts in, are perfectly okay. She's a little better at history than other things, but not by much. Yami always tries his best, however sometimes the fact that he spent most of his life in a forest, means he has a hard time catching up in certain subjects. Namely history and math. Although considering his situation, he has made extremely impressive progress. Thankfully he's not shy about asking for help, so if he's really struggling, he'll tell you. Fuku's grades are a little above average. She doesn't seem to care about doing anything other than not failing and often gets bored during lessons. You'll catch her spaced out, although this isn't on purpose, so just kinda check on her every now and then and make sure she's still paying attention. Especially during math and history. She excels at pretty much anything creative. Otoko, due to being one of the younger kids, he needs a bit more attention to make sure he understands everything. And make sure to pay extra attention to him in case he's struggling since he can't talk to call out for help. Although the other kids usually help with that. Kai, due to Kai's size he can't attend class in person, and has to do so over video call. So it can be hard for him to see things. He also can't really write anything down, so just make sure to accommodate him. Also due to his younger age, he can have difficulty keeping up. Particularly in math. Mu is very much a visual learner. He won't pipe up much, but he is pretty much always paying attention. His grades in just about everything are above average, just make sure he's actually in class before you start. Yanda, don't worry about Yanda's grades or performance in class. Her grades are pretty much perfect, and will likely remain perfect. Just make sure she doesn't gloat about her grades or act condescending about them to other kids. Netsu's grades are surprisingly good despite his dislike of being in class. I guess that's just his dedication to not doing anything half-heartedly. Although he can struggle at times with science. Ken is actually really smart, and has a great memory. The problem is that out of all the children, he probably hates being in class the most. He puts almost zero effort into any of his assignments and almost never pays attention during class. And his grades reflect this. I've convinced him to put a bit more effort into math and science, but his grades there are still a very poor reflection of his potential. Nara has some of the highest grades of all the kids. Near perfect grades in every subject, and she's gone above and beyond, in studying things beyond the curriculum. Don't worry about her, just make sure to answer any questions she has. If you need someone else to tutor another kid, ask her. AKA's grades are perfectly fine in things like math and science, but a bit low elsewhere. And she gets a bit too invested in history lessons. Don't let her rant about things, otherwise the class time will be doubled. Nice has forgotten most of what she was taught, and thus her grades are rather poor. Although she tries hard to amend this. Shina's grades are perfectly average in every regard. No need to give her any more or less attention than anyone else. Just don't let her do anything that requires any amount of dexterity. Alice is a rather intelligent and hardworking student, and her grades would likely be higher if it weren't for her having to adjust to her new surroundings and a new language. Just make sure to help her. If she has trouble understanding something, she should be able to do the rest. Jin, the main issue for Jin is motivation. Just getting him to class is a huge hassle, and getting to stay awake during class is a bigger hassle. His grades are practically non-existent due to him not participating in most tests. Yaba, despite her somewhat thuggish demeanor, Yaba's grades are actually above average. This was mainly out of spite, as people would often assume she was the brutish dumb one of the trio, and so she started seriously studying out of spite. G probably has the best grades out of the kids. With Nara and Yanda competing with her. Although she often pulls ahead. Except in history. She's far more interested in science and math, mostly science. And often spends time in the lab. Inu, much like her sisters, has rather excellent grades. Mainly because she has her sisters to help her, but it's not like she's lacking in intelligence either. She excels in science, not to the same degree as G, but she's still pretty good. And much like G, she has a bit more difficulty with history. Lu actually already had a pretty in-depth education and is familiar with most subjects we're teaching, although he could use a refresher. Recent history is the only real thing he's completely unfamiliar with. Himiko is also a pretty adept student, with grades close to those at the top. She does this exclusively to be praised, so make sure to do so regularly. Her best subject is surprisingly math, which she is a natural at. Currently Tenko has not participated in classes. Hopefully, we should get him to attend in a week or so. Oki is a rather good student, provided he doesn't get distracted by hunger. Normally snacks are not permitted during class, but for him, we can make an exception. Kano's grades are above average, much to her frustration. She very much wants to be in the upper echelons of grades, if only to brag about it. Hopefully, she finds solace in her dressmaking skills. Oto's grades are a little above average, but he doesn't seem to have any real passion for classes. It seems like he's satisfied with his current level. Ko is a bit of a troublemaker in class. She'll often try to perform her pranks during class, such as hiding whoopee cushions in people's seats and putting a water bucket over the door, messing with the projector, hiding supplies, etc. She also doesn't seem to pay much attention during class. As such, her grades are overall poor. Kuki is also disinterested in class, although that may be because he's currently not very pleased with me. Perhaps now that you're teaching, he'll be a bit more motivated? Seikyo, given that she is less than a couple months old, she has a lot to learn. Fortunately, she's very intelligent and quick to adapt. So given a few months of personal tutoring, she should catch up. Sorry, my only advice is to prepare yourself for pain, and keep headache medicine on hand. Chapter 254, Chocolate and Conversations. Contrary to what people would think, or even what Kiba herself would say, she didn't love blood. She didn't even really like it, because every time she looked at blood, she knew someone had to hurt in order to get it, whether in a very minor way or in a very, very dire way. Daddy, Kiba whispered. Kiba stood in the flaming wreck that was once Izuku's office. Everything was either broken or on fire, and the window, as well as the wall it was on, had been broken apart, revealing the ruined fiery wasteland that had once been the beautiful forest she'd played in so often. And at her feet was Izuku's body. Blood leaked from under him as his lifeless eyes stared up at her. Finally, he's dead. Black shadows surrounded them, with blood-red smiles on their non-existent faces. Quirkless scum. Waste of air. All quirkless should die. Slice. Suddenly, Kiba's body changed. Claws appeared from her fingers, which she quickly used to cut through the shadows surrounding her. Slice. 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 Ah. Ah. Stop. Ah. The sounds of screams and the tearing of flesh accompanied Kiba's rampage. She sliced, tore, punched, and bit the shadows like wild animals, splatting their blood across the destroyed room, until no shadows remained. Once Kiba had finished, she found herself standing in a lake of blood. Izuku's body half submerged, his dead eyes still staring at her. This was not enough blood. Nowhere near enough. She'd find them. Everyone who would dare take her daddy away from her, she would have their blood. Raha! Lady Kiba. Ah! Kiba opened her eyes, as she quickly sat up in her bed. Her body was covered in sweat, and she was breathing heavily. Lady Kiba, are you alright? Hinata asked, standing at Kiba's bedside, looking extremely worried. It looked like you were having a nightmare. I am fine. Kiba put on a forced smile. Thank you for waking me. Lady Kiba, we share a bond. Hinata pouted. You can't lie to me. Ugh. Kiba sighed, and all the energy she had to fake awkwardness drained from her, as her expression melted into a miserable look. Hinata, please get me my slippers, I think I need to clear my head. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX enjoyed the gifts he'd given her. The gift of flight, in particular, was something she cherished, even if she wasn't fond of its origins. Kiba floated in the night sky, looking up at the stars. But neither the beauty of the stars nor the cold night air could take her attention away from the dream she'd just had. "Fancy seeing you here, Lady Kiba." Kiba looked down and saw Kyoshi standing on the roof of the house, looking up at her with 2 mugs in his tentacles. "You seem rather distressed. Why don't you come down here and we can talk about it if you like?" Kyoshi offered. "I have hot cocoa." Kiba sighed and flew down to the roof, before sitting down. "All right, sensei." Kyoshi sat down next to her and handed her a cup of hot chocolate. "Now then, what's keeping you up?" I had a bad dream," Kiba said, blushing slightly, embarrassed by how childish that sounded. "Daddy died and I killed a lot of people." "I see," Kyoshi said, as he thought about the best way to break all this down. "Well, you shouldn't have to worry about Mr. Midoriya dying. Your daddy's strong. In almost every sense of the word. He won't let bastards take him down. I still don't understand why they even want to hurt Daddy." Kiba shouted in frustration. "I don't understand quirkism. Not one bit." Well, do you want me to explain it to you?" Kyoshi asked. "The 5 pillars of discrimination? If you can." Kiba nodded, drinking some of her hot cocoa, and getting ready to pay close attention. "The first is fear." Kyoshi started. "People fear things that are different. The moment they see something they're unfamiliar with, their first instinct is to control or destroy it. Or else they fear it will destroy them. The second is superiority. You love feeling like you're special, yes? Well, other people love feeling like that too. To the point where they convince themselves that they were born special, and are part of a special group of people that are better than everyone else. So they treat everyone that's not like them poorly because it makes them feel better about themselves. The third is exploitation. This one is simple. If people think that a group of people deserve to be treated badly, they can profit from it. Making them slaves. Selling books, peddling bad messages. And things like that. And the fourth one is tradition. Some discriminatory beliefs have been around for so long that the people who believe them have it ingrained in their minds that they're right. It's like a plant gets its roots deeper and deeper into the ground, becoming harder and harder to pull out. And the last one is stupidity. Some people are simply told that people should be treated poorly for whatever reason, and they believe it. Simple as that. So which ones are the QLA? Kiba asked. Probably a combination of superiority, tradition, and, oh right, there is one more pillar of discrimination I forgot about, Kyoshi said as he sipped his hot chocolate. Revenge. You see, sometimes bad things happen to people. And those bad things are done by other people. So the victims of those crimes grow a hatred for those people, and anyone like them. I believe back then, one of the main reasons was the QLA was created in the first place, because of the discrimination they faced from quirkless people. So because they got discriminated against, now they discriminate. Kiba thought about that for a few seconds, her expression growing increasingly sour. That's stupid. All the people who hurt them died. And didn't some quirkless people help them during that war? Yeah, but rage can overcome logic, Kyoshi said. Some people deal with pain by inflicting pain onto others. Kiba flinched. And I see that transitions onto our next topic rather well, Kyoshi said. Tell me. Did you feel good when you killed those people in your dream? I. Kiba started to tremble a bit, but then Kyoshi put one of his tentacles on her head. Don't worry, I'm not going to judge you, Kyoshi assured her. I don't have the right to. I'm only trying to guide you and help you through your confusion. So why don't you ask the question you've been wanting to ask? Sensei, is it right? Kiba hesitated for a second, before taking a breath and forcing her question out. Is it right to want to kill them? I hate them. I hate them so much. I just want them to go away. Kyoshi waited for a second to respond, letting Kiba recompose herself a bit before answering. To your question, no. It's a crime to want to kill someone. You go through life long enough, and eventually, you'll find at least one person you'll want dead. Even someone as kind as your father has people he'd love to murder. Like that Garaki guy. If he hadn't taken his own life, I'm sure Mr. Midoriya would have. And I'm sure he would have loved to do much, much worse. To hate is to be human. I've never met a single person without hate in their heart, okay, except for that K-girl, but she's abnormal. But aside from her, everyone has hate in their heart. And eventually, that hate escalates into wanting someone gone. But wanting to do something, and actually doing it, are very different. Taking a life, even if it's the life of someone bad, should only be done if absolutely necessary. After all, death means they can't repent. They can't change and reform. And you'd never know what kind of things a person could do if they turned to the light. To hate it to be human, but the thing that puts us above savage animals is to control that hate. Without that, we become nothing but mindless beasts, slaves to our, you understand? Yeah, I think I get it. Kiba said, with an expression that showed she was still thinking about this very deeply. Thank you, Sensei. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Izuku sighed as he walked to the kitchen. Izuku had ended up working late last night, which led to him sleeping during the day, and waking up a couple hours ago. Meaning he wasn't going to fall asleep again, anytime soon. He went into the kitchen, and found none other than Ken, with his hand in the cookie jar. Literally. Hey, Ken said nervously, as he put down the jar, but continued taking out a cookie. Izuku sighed. I'll let it slide this time, but being in class while sleepy is gonna be a real pain, you know. Ken shrugged and immediately scarfed down the cookie. Izuku shook his head and walked up to the fridge, and pulled out a pre-made meatball. As Izuku went to heat it up, Ken kept staring at him for a while, before eventually saying something. So, how can you just keep going? What do you mean? Izuku asked as he took the clear wrap off the bowl and placed it in the microwave. Okay, why do you want to help people so much? Ken asked, looking genuinely confused. Like, you wanted to be a hero for so long. Even though the world was treating you like crap the entire time. How? Well. Izuku paused, taking a minute to really think about it. I'm not sure I can fully answer that. It just never dissuaded me. Part of that was probably just because I blamed myself for a lot of the things I went through, but overall, I can't really give you a good answer for that. So you're just that good of a guy, huh? Ken sighed, looking a bit discouraged. And then there's me. I wonder about that. Izuku frowned. At the end of the day, no matter what, I can't think of myself as anything but a people pleaser. Me and Sue are ultimately not too different. However, people pleasers aren't always good people. As the people they want to please may not be good either. I wonder if I'd never seen a hero. Never got that dream. What would have become of me? But something that worries me even more is a time not too long ago. Just before Eri found me. I was so desperate for a purpose. I would have done anything if I thought it might make someone happy. If I was someone worth taking advantage of, I wonder what someone could have convinced me to do, or if I would ever be able to stop, with that messed up mind of mine. Izuku turned to Ken. Ken, why do you want to be a hero? You don't seem to like people all too much. You've made that very clear. As much as you love being praised, I don't think you're willing to risk your life for it. Especially when you could get it in other ways. And it's not like you need any more money. So what's your real reason? Ken hesitated, but eventually, he spoke. Sis was always better with people than I was. She probably would have made more friends if it wasn't for me. So she liked the idea of helping people out as a hero. And so I just went along with it. It's not like I hated the idea. I don't hate people. I get that there are good, innocent people out there, and I do want to help them out. Plus I always liked the idea of beating up bad guys, so I can kill a couple birds with one stone. But your main goal is to protect your sister, Izuku said. I mean, I'd kinda be a bad brother if I didn't, well, a worse brother. Ken pouted. And don't tell her about any of this, it's embarrassing. Izuku smiled. I won't. But I do have one piece of advice for you. While helping others is extremely fulfilling, it's also one of the most draining things you can do. So don't forget to help yourself too. Being just a bit selfish isn't always a bad thing. And just because you did something wrong, doesn't mean you need to sacrifice your own happiness to make it right. Please remember that. Ken frowned and looked down at his Omnitrix. Sure. But what about you? Are you gonna be more selfish? Izuku sighed as he took out his meal. I can try. And who knows? Maybe one day far into the future. With the help of my therapist and the support of my family. Maybe one day, I'll willingly take a day off. Chapter 255, Project Empower. Project Empower. Project Empower is a project suggested by Mr. Midoriya and given a level 2 priority. The project is focused on enhancing weaker individuals who wish to become heroes. This project spans multiple different divisions and is given authorization to use all available resources for this project, so long as it does not impact any higher priority projects. Today we'll be going over projects from multiple divisions, under the umbrella of Project Empower. Project Mood Ring. Project Mood Ring was suggested by Dr. Gatto, under Dr. Futaba's division. The thesis of this project is that emotions can be used to increase the power of quirks. As such, they wish to develop devices that can be used to convert emotion into power. These devices would be in the shape of multicolored rings. Each is capable of manifesting a specific emotion and turning it into power. We have 4 currently under development. A red ring, which is powered by rage. A green ring powered by willpower. A pink ring powered by love. And a blue ring powered by hope. While this project is certainly possible, it is currently facing a few major problems. First is that they have a hard time getting the emotions to properly manifest as power in the rings. And second is that whenever they do, the rings immediately explode. This project will likely take years to complete. Project Girl Power. Project Girl Power was proposed by Dr. K, under Dr. Hada's division. The idea behind this is that we already have multiple sources of additional chaos energy, locked away inside our bodies. That energy comes from our reproductive parts. Specifically eggs in the female case, and fluids in the male's case. If we could somehow let a person develop and utilize that power for themselves, we could increase their power by several magnitudes. Currently, we have developed a method for females, but for males utilization of this seems to be impossible. By injecting the eggs inside the womb with a newly developed fluid known only as magical juice, the eggs will become fertilized. But instead of becoming babies, they will become what are called magical eggs. These eggs will provide a significant amount of power to the user's quirk, as well as increasing the power of their body's overall abilities. While this project has been refined and tested, the most notable and unchangeable drawback to this process is that it removes the ability for that woman to have children. An additional, and much less notable side effect, is that whenever the user utilizes their power, their womb will glow. This project is unusable on men, as well as women who are already incapable of having children. The project is ready for use and already has one successful case of being used on a person. However, due to the drawback of the procedure, the limited pool of people it's available to, and the overall discomforting nature of it, it's unlikely many people will be Project Tree Night. Project Dark Night started after the Botany Division made a new discovery. They discovered a new plant that can heavily increase the abilities of certain individuals. The process goes as such. First, we take what is known as the night nut and give it to the user, who swallows it. Once it reaches the stomach, it dissolves and then its seeds pour into the rest of the body, where the conversion process begins. Some of the seeds are absorbed into various parts of the body and converted into a half-plant-like being. Once that happens, new glands and organs are grown inside the being. While the conversion process is happening, the subject will go into a hibernation-like slumber. And all their nerves will be sealed off, making them unable to feel pain. During this time, you'll need to make sure the subject is constantly exposed to sunlight. After about a week, the subject will awaken, changed by the nut. Their skin will turn green, and their entire body will now be composed of half-plant cells. The abilities they gain from this transformation are thus: while doing normal activities, they will experience no change. However, when doing strenuous activities, they will see a 30% boost in strength and speed. And they will receive an overall boost in stamina. About 60%. Their regeneration ability will increase significantly. Small wounds will close in seconds. Larger ones will heal in minutes. They will even be able to regenerate limbs and other things they normally wouldn't be able to. Although they will still die if they're decapitated, or if too much of the body is destroyed. The last ability they have is the ability to manipulate special organs in their muscles that can grow a bark-like material. This material can move to the outside and cover the skin. And the user can shape it however they please, making it into armor and weapons. As you can tell, this is an extremely potent power-up ability. However, there are drawbacks. First of all, to even undergo this process successfully, you have to be genetically compatible with it. For those incompatible, the process will likely kill or cripple them. Thankfully, we can test if they're compatible or not, so we don't have to risk trying it on any non-concurrent subjects or shut down the project entirely. Also, even if you are genetically compatible, there are still things that can disqualify you from the process. To survive the conversion, the subject must be at peak health. So if the subject suffers from any medical conditions, they are ineligible. Once the users are converted, they will suffer two main drawbacks. First is that they will be required to eat double the amount of food a normal person would have to consume. If they do any strenuous activities, this can go up quadruple the amount. On top of this, the user will have to take in a lot of sunlight. Or else they will weaken significantly, and could even die. While this project is ready to go, its limits regarding genetic compatibility will likely lead to this project's stagnation. Project Mechanization. Project Mechanization was suggested by Mr. Midoriya himself, and is under the supervision of Dr. Hikari and Dr. Hata's divisions, respectively. This project revolves around the idea of using robotic parts to augment people's abilities, turning them into cyborgs. Simply giving them robotic parts is no issue. The real issue is connecting it to their chaos energy and enhancing it. The use of fractals is ineffective. While androids are immune to the side effects of fractals, cyborgs are not. Chaos emeralds are effective, and given the right modifications, cyborgs can actually use chaos emeralds more effectively than most non-cyborgs. However, the chaos emeralds are one of the few resources we're not allowed to use for Project Empower. We have two current methods we can use to make this project work. The first is optimization. Altering the body to make it perfectly optimized to use their quirk. Although the boost in power this offers is normally minimal, it can offer great amounts of control and minimize drawbacks. The second is enhancement. While fractals are not usable long-term, and chaos emeralds are too valuable, due to the cybernetic nature of the project, certain things that were off the table are now options. There were prototype emeralds that were deemed to be failures. Soul emeralds. Soul emeralds are far easier to make than chaos emeralds, much like fractals, but unlike fractals, they are capable of holding pure chaos energy. They're not nearly as powerful as a chaos emerald, but they still give a significant boost to one's ability. The reason it was deemed a failure, however, is because the materials that compose the soul emeralds are far worse at containing that power. For the most part, it's fine, but as soon as a person touches them, they would likely immediately begin to burn from the inside out. Cybernetic beings, on the other hand, can be augmented to be able to use this power without dying. After much testing, we've finally come up with a design that will use the soul emeralds to enhance their quirks as well as their physical capabilities. This project is currently ready for human testing and is seemingly perfect. If not for one issue. It was extremely expensive. The cybernetic parts by themselves cost millions, and the soul emeralds are even more expensive. It would be best to keep this project limited. For the sake of our budget. Project Cyberization. Project Cyberization was suggested by Dr. Ken and is currently on hold. The idea behind this is to abandon the body entirely. Removing the soul from the body, and placing it inside a robot. This process would ideally be done by crystallizing the soul, so it can be removed and placed into robotic bodies. Using the same process we use with fractals to create androids. This project has been put on hold, as the idea of messing with souls has certain researchers hesitant. Although Dr. Ken has been allowed to continue his research, due to Mr. Midoriya showing interest in the project. This project is to be kept under the highest level of secrecy, as I don't think I need to explain why the public might not like the idea of the Midoriya Foundation ripping out people's souls. Chapter 256, Faster Than Fast. Gah! Nara shouted. She was currently in the forest, in her XLR-8 form, rushing to Kyoshi. Only for him to dodge to the side, avoiding her attempt to grab him. Nara continued to try and grab him, all the while Kyoshi weaved each attempt. Then Kyoshi ran away, deeper into the forest, with Nara following in pursuit. The two ran through the forest at speeds beyond that of a bullet train. Not bad, it's rare that anyone is able to move this fast. Kyoshi praised, turning around and running backward to talk to her. TCH. Nara grunted. She tried to speed up, but she was already going beyond her max. And he still wasn't breaking a sweat. BRRR. Now. Nara growled. As much as it hurt her pride, she had no choice but to accept defeat here. She started slowing down, more and more trying to make sure she didn't get herself killed when she transformed back. BRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRRR In a flash Nara was back to normal, and still running faster than her legs could support, causing her to trip and roll forward towards a tree. Before she could hit, however, Kyoshi dashed in and swooped her up.
That was close. I insist you be more careful next time. Kyoshi lightly scolded.
Still, that speed of yours is impressive. Maybe when you're all grown up, you can make me actually break a sweat in a race.
He. Nara pouted.
Alright.
I get it. But don't think you're the fastest just yet. There's still one thing I haven't tried yet. X.
Ken was eating some cereal in the cafeteria when Nara walked up to him.
Fuse with me, Nara demanded. Ken stopped eating and raised an eyebrow. 1. No. 2. Why? I lost in a race. Nara huffed, blushing a bit with embarrassment. She'd never been outsped before. XLR8 had always been the fastest around.
Sure, she knew she might not be as fast as someone like All Might, but that was All Might. Comparing herself to him was unfair in any regard. Although she was also aware that Achiko, the Gammas, and maybe full-power Kiba would be able to outspeed her, all of those came with caveats. The Gammas could outspeed her now, but when she grew up she'd probably be faster. And Achiko and Kiba could only go that fast for so long before the drawbacks to their quirks slowed them down. But Kyoshi was on another level. He was likely as fast, if not faster than All Might. And she'd never be able to catch up with him. At least not by herself.
You lost a race? Ken asked, slightly shocked by that. Was it that new teacher guy? Is he that fast? Faster. His speed is ridiculous. Nara said. The only way I can outspeed him is with your help. So just fuse with me already. Ken pondered it. On the one hand, he didn't particularly like fusing. But on the other hand, his sister would probably be really annoying for a while if he refused. Alright, but you owe me one. What are we even fusing XLR8 with anyway? Not like I have any super fast forms.
Just pick your fastest form, Nara told him, before shuddering.
Which is probably Stingfly, huh? Probably.
Flying is way faster than running.
Ken said. Wonder what kind of fusion that'll be. Let's just get this over with. Nara sighed.
We'll do some practice in the new form today, and then race Sensei in the morning tomorrow.
Got it? Yeah, sure. Ken rolled his eyes. Just let me finish my cereal. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX time.
Kyoshi said as they stood at the edge of the forest.
That's right. Today we'll show you who the fastest one around really is. Nara said. Ken. It's fusion time.
Man, you are really fired up, huh? Ken said as he got ready.
The two activated their Omnitrix and in a flash of blue, the two had become one.
What stood in their place was a red humanoid manta ray, with big green eyes, black outlines on their face, and yellow horns. They had gills on their sides, and yellow patagia under their arms. Lastly, they also had a long, thin red tail.
That was not what I expected, Kyoshi said. It doesn't really look like a fusion. Yeah, we don't really understand how the whole fusion thing works either. The fusion said.
Apparently it's not really fusing the forms, it's kinda like how kids are born with quirks that are related to their parents, but much stronger.
I see. So it'll take certain elements, but overall it's its own thing. Kyoshi said. How interesting. By the way, what exactly should I call you?
Call us, Jet Ray.
The fusion said. Now let's race already. We can only do this once a day. My apologies. Let's not waste any more time then. Kyoshi said. Whoosh. With that, Kyoshi suddenly dashed away. You little.
Jet Ray scowled, before jumping into the air, and quickly giving chase.
Boom. Jet Ray flew forward after Kyoshi, at insane speeds, cutting through the air like a knife.
As they started catching up to Kyoshi very quickly.
Oh wow, they weren't kidding.
They've just started and they're already this fast. Kyoshi thought, as he then sped up significantly, actually putting in a bit of effort, causing him to go significantly faster.
Oh no you don't.
Jet Ray said, before moving forward even faster.
Boom.
The two continued to race around the edge of the forest. The two of them both increased their speed little by little, as Jet Ray started catching up to Kyoshi bit by bit.
Come on. So close.
Jet Ray thought as they slowly decreased the distance between them and Kyoshi.
How truly impressive, Kyoshi said.
However, you're a few years off before you can catch me.
Kaboom!
Suddenly Kyoshi shot forward again, the sound barrier breaking as he increased his speed to max, and started outpacing Jet Ray once again.
A sonic boom.
Jet Ray gasped, looking at the fleeing Kyoshi in awe for a moment, before giving him a determined glare.
We're not done yet.
Jet Ray flapped their arms, as they mustered up every bit of power they could, making them go faster and faster.
Boom! Boom! Boom!
Small bursts formed around them, as they approached breaking the sound barrier.
Come on! I'm so close! Jet Ray thought. And then everything went black. Oh!
Kyoshi thought as he saw Jet Ray start to fall out of the sky.
He turned around and caught Jet Ray, who slammed into Kyoshi. Off!
Kyoshi grunted as he spat out blood, the pain only getting worse as the two slammed into the ground. Kyoshi took the brunt of the force as his back skidded across the dirt.
Ow 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 ow.
After skidding a few more miles, they came to a stop. The back of Kyoshi's robe had been completely destroyed, and there was some yellow pus-like stuff leaking out. Well, this is extremely painful, Kyoshi said casually, before looking down at the unconscious Jet Ray.
BRRRRR. BRRRRRR. BRRRRR. BRRRRRR.
In a flash of red, Jet Ray had turned back into Ken and Nara, both of them looking a bit scuffed up.
Ugh.
They both groaned.
XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX annoyed. Not to go over our limit, Ken and Nara said at the same time.
The two of them were laid up in the infirmary. Vera had fixed most of the injuries they'd gotten from crashing into Kyoshi, although they were still a bit groggy.
Kyoshi on the other hand seemed perfectly fine. Good as new after changing into a new set of clothes. I apologize, Mr. Midoriya.
I didn't expect them to suddenly run out of energy so soon. It's fine, these forms don't work the same way normal human bodies work. I couldn't expect you to know how they work, Izuku said.
This is fully on them. I'm sorry, Ken and Nara said simultaneously. Ken shot Nara a look that said, I hope you're happy. And Nara just stuck her tongue out. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX
Himiko, who blocked it with his own fake knife.
Giza watched as the two fought each other, with AKA by his side looking at the two in awe. Wow! Those two are amazing! AKA said as she watched the knife fight.
Yes, the two have grown quite adept at this. Almost so for children.
Giza noted as he stroked his beard. However, there is one thing that actually worries me. Oto thrust his knife forward at Himiko's neck, but Himiko fell back onto her arms and delivered a powerful kick to his stomach. Oto struggled not to make a sound as he got the wind knocked out of him, and he stumbled back. Himiko jumped back onto her feet and ran at Oto. Oto swiped at Himiko with his knife to keep her away, but Himiko jumped over him. Oto panicked and quickly turned around to try and do something to stop her, but the moment he turned around, he found Himiko's knife was already at his throat. I win!
Himiko sang, putting up a peace sign with her other hand, and smiling cheerfully.
AKA gave Himiko an applause. Nice one! That was amazing! Oto, on the other hand, didn't seem as enthused. Scowling at Himiko, before dropping his knife and walking away. Himiko looked confused. Huh? Did I do something bad?
No, that's just the natural reaction when confronted with an unfair amount of talent, Giza said. It wounds the pride a bit.
But he will get over it in time. It's not that Giza didn't understand.
Oto had spent most of his life learning to fight, mostly against his will, using very harsh methods to become proficient in close-quarters combat, to minimize the use of his overly destructive quirk. Himiko had been training for a little over a month and was already better with a knife than him. She was a prodigy, with reflexes and muscle memory that were, strictly speaking, some of the best Giza had ever seen. It's like she was made for violence. Although to be fair, Oto was still a little bit better than her when it came to pure hand-to-hand, that was likely little consolation for the poor boy.
Aha! 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 Oto had had enough.
He went back to his room to try and get some rest after his loss, and of course, his sister was there. Naturally, Ko asked why he looked so upset, and Oto gave her a quick answer before laying down. Then his sister started playing that obnoxious text-to-speech laugh on repeat, while silently laughing her heart out. Oto quickly rose up and glared at his sister, before signing.
Could you stop? Oh, I'm sorry, am I making you upset? Ko signed back smugly.
I didn't think you could even feel emotions anymore, you smug bastard.
Why are you like this? Oto signed. What did I ever do to you? The fact that you have to ask is a problem. Ko scowled, before getting up and leaving. Oto shook his head. Why did she even come here? That will be it for this part.
I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 48.
If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.